Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. I go over the state of the comic industry on my channel a lot, but I usually give it to you in little bits and pieces throughout my videos. So today I'm going to do an overview of the comic industry as I see it, and to give you some evidence that this is indeed the case. And what I'm going to do is look at Marvel as my example of the comic industry, because really Marvel is setting the tone for the entire comic industry. And the thing is that when you look at Marvel, you can't simply look at the comics. You have to look at Marvel as an entire industry, because the point is that their money maker is what controls what is going on in their company. And the biggest money maker for Marvel has been the movies for quite some time now. Marvel has not been a company for a long time that has generated the majority of its money through comics. It is the movies that are the money maker. You have the studios spending millions upon millions of dollars, and hopefully with their movies making millions upon millions of dollars in profit, if not $1 billion in profit for their movies. And that is the first big money maker for their company. But it also generates the secondary money maker for their company. And this secondary moneymaker is merchandise, because the multi-million-dollar movies are put out there, and their secondary purpose is to sear into the minds of the general public and pop culture all the imagery that they put on display within the movie. And they do that in order to have those images within the minds of the general public in order to sell as much merchandise as possible of any kind that they can think of. But here's the thing. Their merchandise is simply a load of crap. Pardon my French. But that's what it is. I would say that a story, like your movies and your comic books, actually has a purpose for your life. It has something to do with entertainment. It has a purpose in your life. But the majority of the merchandise that they are selling as their secondary money maker does not really have any practical application for your life whatsoever. And really, it's just a load of garbage. As I have said in a number of videos, all of their merchandise is the equivalent of a $2 slave labor t-shirt that they put out there with your superhero image slapped onto the front of it in order to sell for $30 a pop. That's what all of their merchandise really is. And since their merchandise has no real practical application for anybody's life, well, then they need to employ a marketing strategy that is going to allow them to sell such a useless product. And how they do that is they sell to emotional buyers. So they sell to people who are, for example, impulse buyers, or people who are nostalgia buyers. These are the kinds of emotional sales that they need in order to sell this useless merchandise. And here's where the political, ideological comes into the mix. Because if their biggest target is emotional buyers, well, then they're going to target emotional people. We can see very clearly over at Marvel Comics that they are trying to get a female audience, quite specifically, and they're alienating their male audience in order to do it. Why would they do that? Why? Because women, on the whole, are much more emotional buyers than men are. But just having half of the population, which is your female half of the population, under your thumb as an emotional buyer is not quite enough. They need to be able to rope in as many people as possible from both sexes. And in order to do that, they of course target your quote-unquote progressive ideological people. Why? Because your progressive ideology is based on nothing but emotion. The entire progressive ideology boils down to emotion. Even when someone has an argument on their side, on the progressive side, if you dig down far enough, it will lead to an emotional argument and nothing but. So you have people who are basing their entire lives, their entire worldview upon emotional argumentation, if any argumentation at all, if not just plain emotion. And so, of course, they're going to target these people because they need emotional people to buy their merchandise. And what more, These progressive people are people who support globalism, are people who support no borders, and this is exactly what Disney and Marvel want as well. Why? Because they desperately want the world to be brown. They desperately want the world to have one culture, one language, one religion, just one world government, globalism. That's what they want, because when they have that, all they need to do is produce one product for the entire world, instead of worrying about how do we produce a product for the Chinese market or for the American market or for the European market. Why do we need to do all of this for all of these different regions? We just want to produce one product for the entire world. And if they can get to do that, they can increase their profit 100-fold, and so make much more money. So this plays into their economic plan of how to sell their product and who they want to sell their product to. And so what does this all have to do with the comic industry? Well, since their big money maker is primarily the movies and secondarily the merchandise, everything within their entire company is going to revolve around the movies. And that is what your comics do right now. They revolve around the movies. As I have said in a number of videos, comics right now are not their own industry at all. They're not even a comic industry. What they are the equivalent of the free magazines that you get at the movie theater, that you read while you're sitting in your seat waiting for the movie to start, that are hopefully, in the minds of the people who put them out there, hopefully going to draw you into the movie theater again in order to watch another movie. That is exactly what Marvel Comics is right now, the equivalent of these free magazines. Now, these magazines cost $4 to $5 a pop in most places, but that's just because Disney and Marvel are simply using the delivery system that is now in place to get these free magazines out there. If they had to abandon that system and go to another system, they would do so. If that system eventually had to become free, they would do so. That would be what would happen, because they're simply using these comics as magazines to draw people into the movies. Now, this is where I get to my evidence of this being the case, because I was waiting with bated breath for the January and February numbers for Comic-Con to come out to see how the new Captain Marvel book was doing from its number 1 to its number 2. Because January, you have the numbers for Captain Marvel number 1, and February, you have the numbers for Captain Marvel number 2. And the reason why I wanted to look at this is because I wanted to see how many copies of Captain Marvel number 1 they put out there just for free. Because what Marvel does with number 1s is that they put multiple covers on them, so you get people who buy multiple copies of the same comic, and they also overship drastically, especially number 1s. They have come out and said that they were going to do this for Iceman number 1. They double shipped everything. So if your comic store ordered 10, they got 20 at least. And so they overship a lot of these comics. And when I looked at the numbers, for January, Captain Marvel number 1 shipped 111,391 units. And that put it at number 2 for the top 500 comics sold in January. But of course, in order to see the actual number of comic buyers, you usually have to go to the number 2, because that weeds out all of those overshipped copies, and that weeds out all of those multiple copies that are sold to the same person. And when you look at the numbers for Captain Marvel number 2 for February 2019, they shipped 37,380 units, and that put it at number 39 on the top 500 comics sold in February 2019. So how many comics, how many free comics did they put out with Captain Marvel number 1? Well, it would be around 74,000 comics. That's how many comics of Captain Marvel number 1 they basically gave away for free. And even if you took that to be the maximum number, and we'll be generous and say that the minimum number was half of that, That's still 37,000 comics. That's as many comics as they sold for issue number 2. So the ratio of comics shipped to comics actually bought and read by customers was minimum 2 to 1 and maximum 3 to 1. That is flooding the shelves with a comic. And flooding the shelves not to sell the comic itself, but to sell something else, because the comic is simply an advertisement, the equivalent of a free advertisement for the movie, to get people to see the movie. But I noticed something else really interesting as I was going over the numbers for January and February for Captain Marvel. In January, I wanted to see how many Captain Marvel titles were out there, not just for comics, but also for graphic novels. And I found that there were 10 different titles put out in January 2019 under the name of Captain Marvel. You have Captain Marvel number 1 itself, which, as I said, shipped 111,000 units. You had The Life of Captain Marvel number 5, which shipped 1,500 units. You had The Life of Captain Marvel trade paperback, which shipped around 4,000 units. You had Marvel Superhero Adventures Captain Marvel, which shipped around 1,700 units. You had The Death of Captain Marvel, which is the old Captain Marvel, so it doesn't really count, but it was a trade paperback that shipped around 1,600 units. And you had Color Your Own Captain Marvel, which shipped 830 units, and you had Captain Marvel Monica Rambeau trade paperback, which shipped 718 units, and again, that doesn't really have to do with the current Captain Marvel, but I'll stick it in there. And you had Captain Marvel Earth's Mightiest Hero Volume 1 trade paperback, which shipped 431 copies. You had Captain Marvel Volume 1 Higher, Further, Faster, which is a trade paperback, and shipped 411 copies. And you had Captain Marvel Carol Danvers Volume 1 The Miss Marvel Years trade paperback, which shipped 218 copies. Now, we can see a few things from this. First of all, we can see such abysmal low numbers for these 10 different Captain Marvel titles that had come out in January of 2019. But there were 10 of them, and that's a lot, you might think, because they were putting all of this stuff out there in order to promote perhaps the Captain Marvel number 1 that came out that same month. But if you look at the numbers for February of 2019, you see something different entirely. You see that in February, they had 23 separate titles for Captain Marvel come out in that month alone. 23. In January, they only had 10. In February, they had 23 separate titles. And I'll go over them really quickly. For the comics, there was Captain Marvel number 2, which, as I said, shipped 37,380 units. Captain Marvel Braver and Mightier, 28,844 units. True Believers, Captain Marvel, Miss Marvel, 19,500 units. True Believers, Captain Marvel Betrayed, 15,400 units. True Believers Captain Marvel Earth's Mightiest Hero, 14,000 units. True Believers Captain Marvel Spider-Man and Miss Marvel, 12,600 units. True Believers Captain Marvel New Miss Marvel, 12,200 units. True Believers Captain Marvel Binary, 12,000 units. True Believers Captain Marvel Kree Skrull War, 11,800 units. You had the back issues of Captain Marvel number 1, 11,700 units. True Believers Captain Marvel Avenger, 11,000 units. True Believers Captain Marvel vs. Ronin, 11,000 units. You had a Captain Marvel trade paperback, which shipped 1,000 units. You had Marvel Superhero Adventures Captain Marvel First Days of School, which is a trade paperback, which shipped 800 units. Marvel's Captain Marvel Prelude, 1,700 units. Captain Marvel Miss Marvel A Hero is Born Omnibus, 1,200 units. Captain Marvel Earth's Mightiest Hero Volume 5 trade paperback, 1,100 units. The Life of Captain Marvel trade paperback, 630 units. Captain Marvel Earth's Mightiest Hero Volume 1 trade paperback, 328 units. Captain Marvel Volume 1 Higher, Further, More trade paperback, 200 units. Marvel Superhero Adventures Captain Marvel, 180 units. Captain Marvel Carol Danvers Volume 1 Miss Marvel Years trade paperback, 150 units. Captain Marvel Earth's Mightiest Hero Volume 2 trade paperback, 140 units. So that's all 23 of them. And you'll notice again the abysmal low numbers for almost every one of these books. But they were putting out 23 separate titles for Captain Marvel for February of this year. Now, why in the world would they put out 23 separate titles of a character that they know nobody wants? Because you have these numbers, and they have these numbers as well. And I have done a separate video talking about the jobs that are available at Marvel. Most of those jobs posted last time I did that were market analyst jobs. They wanted them to analyze the market and the numbers in order to see who and what to sell to. So not only do they have access to these numbers, they have access to the pure numbers before all of this overshipping, and they have people analyzing them. And if they have these people analyzing them, and they can see just as well as we do that these are abysmal numbers, nobody wants to read Captain Marvel. From number 1 to number 2 of the new Captain Marvel book, you had 74,000 comics that were simply given away for free. Nobody wants these comics. Why in the world would they put out 23 separate titles of this character when no one wants it? Why? Because, of course, the movie is coming out. And they want to generate hype for the movie. That's all Marvel is. That's all the comics are coming out of Marvel. They want to generate hype for the movie so that people go see the movie because it's their money maker and leads to their secondary money maker of the merchandise. And what more, Marvel has declared 2019 the year of Captain Marvel. So you're going to see these Captain Marvel titles be pumped out month after month after month in 2019. Why? Because first of all, they wanted to pre-sell the movie, and then they're going to use these books to remind you that, oh, I went to see the movie. I can order an advanced copy with my ticket stub, or I'm going to buy the DVD when it comes out, or I'm going to watch it on Netflix when it comes out, or I'm going to go see the Avengers movie because I went to see that Captain Marvel movie. In order to give me some of the story for the Avengers movie, I have to remember to go see the Avengers movie. This is what they are doing. This is why they're putting out this number of titles for this character that no one wants to read about in the comics. Because this is not an industry that actually produces comics for the sake of making money with comics. And we have to realize that it's really not an industry at all. It's just a sub-industry of the movie. It is just the free magazines that they pump out in order to generate word of mouth for the next Marvel movie that is coming out. So, hopefully I've given you something new to think about. If I did, hit like. Hit the shield in the lower right hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about all this. Alright, I'll see you later. Bye.